Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome everybody to Nightlight. So glad that you could join me on this hot summer evening, at least where I am, and you know, kind of get some insight into some of the aspects of our own self that we are looking to develop and to manifest and to grow and to share with humanity. I want to thank first Ken Quiethawk for his intro. He, as always, is a magical person, and it is an honor and a privilege that he opens Nightlight with his magical voice. He's a native storyteller, and I encourage all of you to seek him out on the internet and learn about his craft and how he has helped to preserve history and cosmology in a truly unique and different way, something we all should pay attention to. But for tonight, I have Angela Wix with me, and she has written a book called The Secret Psychic. And it is a unique and inspiring resource that shows you how to practice your subtle energetic abilities and fully embrace your spiritual nature, even if you feel like you can't yet be open about it with those around you. She answers your burning questions about what it means to be a secret psychic, how to overcome common challenges, and how to integrate your experience so you don't feel stuck. The Secret Psychic also helps you understand spirit communication and offers guidance as to how to reveal your hidden self to others when you're ready. In addition to more than 20 hands-on practices, you'll find empowering support from professional psychics, mediums, and intuition experts. It's a really super book for anybody who is looking to enhance their own inner wisdom and bring forward their spiritual energies to empower them within their lives. So I highly recommend it. I don't often recommend books like this, but this one I do recommend to everybody. It's really a very special book, and it will give you, the individual people, the resources they need to enhance themselves, as opposed to teaching them to go find a teacher. So I highly support Angela's work here. It is really a very, very unique and good book. She has acquired Body, Mind, Spirit titles for Llewellyn Worldwide. She's a certified medical Reiki master, certified massage therapist, ordained interfaith minister of spiritual healing, and intuitive medium in training. She's the author of Llewellyn's Little Book of Unicorns and has contributed her writing to The Edge, Elephant Journal, and Llewellyn's complete book of mindful living. For more, you can visit her on Facebook and Instagram at Angela A. Wick, and her website is angelaann.wick.com/arts. So, welcome to the show, Angela.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Well, it's a pleasure. I think you've finally written a book that I can actually, endorse. I mean, the element of being psychic is something that I think everybody everybody plays with as they grow up, and they wonder if they have the talent, the skill, or the gift. And your book really helps everybody to see that they all have the talent. It's like a muscle. If you work with it, it will work for you.
Exactly. It's one of those interesting things that I think a lot of people end up seeking out other people for their intuitive insights, especially if they're professionals. They're looking to the professional. But what I'm trying to help people recognize is that we all actually have these abilities, and no matter who you are, you have that independent power to be able to engage with those talents and those skills and develop them in a mindful way.
And it's a wonderful way to be your own teacher, too, because who knows best what you need than the spirit inside of you?
Right. And part of the whole process is learning how to listen to that still small voice inside of you and listen to that inner calling so that you can hear what you're naturally being drawn to yourself.
Well, so how do you... I know that at one point in time, I think when I was first starting in, the thing that cued me in that maybe there was something, someone, somehow that I should be listening to that I wasn't. I remember being outside and hearing my name called and nobody around. And I found a lot of other people that have experienced that same thing. Have you felt that or experienced that at any time?
Yeah, actually, the first instance that I can remember that I totally forgot about, but when I started learning about psychic ability and taking classes in it and actively, intentionally trying to learn more about it, I had this memory of when I was a kid. I was probably about 4 years old, and I was playing with this toy, and I was alone, and this toy, it was a jar, and on the inside there was a little toy bee on a string, and it was magnetized so that when you moved the jar around, it looked like it was flying inside of this jar. And I was so focused and just mesmerized by the motion and the movement. And all of a sudden I was shocked out of it because I heard someone buzzing in my ear. And it wasn't a real bug. It was the sound of a person making a bug noise, just doing that buzz.
Uh-huh.
And I was so startled, and I was looking around, and I was so confused because I didn't have a context for someone speaking or someone making a noise when you couldn't see them around you, obviously. So
Yeah.
when I started actually learning about psychic ability, I had this automatic recognition of like, oh my gosh, that was actually someone in spirit. And when I tuned in to be like, okay, what was going on? Why did they do that? I just get this very strong sense that it was someone who was connected with me. I'm not quite sure how, but they were just like being really playful, and they were just having a little bit of fun. So that's the first instance that I can remember myself.
I think we all have these synchronistic experiences, and it's a matter of if you pay attention to them. And in my mind, at least I recommend that people write down these synchronicities, because in a way that's letting the universe know I paid attention, I saw it, and that way you get more and more of these occurrences. And in my experience, in my development, I found that every time there was something that was so synchronistic I couldn't believe it, excuse me, I would write it down, and within a day or so something else would happen, so that it was a matter of becoming more and more sensitive to the world around you that is energy as well, and how it is impacting you and trying to give you a message. Doesn't necessarily mean we're all going to be standing on a mountaintop with a staff parting the Dead Sea, but it does mean that it is another one of your senses, and if you use it, it adds greater richness to your life. So you've written a book. obviously your life has been on a pathway, and you've followed your bliss, you followed your yearnings, the things that you've always wanted to do. You've kind of put them in place so you could do them. How would you recommend to somebody out there sitting there listening, saying, "I'm just normal. There's nothing special about me. I could never do this." I mean, that's what you're going to get if we took calls. That's exactly what you'd get.
Right.
So those people that don't feel they have this special ability, this special quality, what do you say to them? How do you get them to the point where they will begin to recognize and then utilize these energies they have inside of them?
Well, I would say I am also that person, even though I felt like I had this strong calling to the spiritual side of myself, and I was always really interested in reading about these types of topics and speaking with people who were kind of in this world. So for me, my interest has been since I was like 12 years old, and I've been working for a Mind, Body, Spirit publisher, Llewellyn Worldwide, who publishes books on psychic development and so much more. I've been working there for 11 years, and it wasn't until I actually wrote this book and was interviewing different professional psychics and mediums and seeing what the beginning of their own journeys were, where I could see, I had so many aha moments of like, oh my gosh, that was how it started for me too, or oh my gosh, I had the same type of experience, or this is what I felt in the beginning of my journey too. So for me, it really leveled the playing field of realizing that we all have the same power and insight and intuitive ability in us. So I think the starting point for everyone is just, coming with a sense of openness. Even if you don't really believe, okay, I'm psychic and I'm going to do this, you can just come with curiosity and come with a sense of playfulness. And I always say books are a great starting point. Just start reading different resources that are out there and see what calls to you, see what types of things you're drawn to. Maybe it's dream work and looking at the symbology there. Maybe it's energy work and looking into natural healing in that way. Maybe you're interested in clear empathy, where you're looking at the different type of emotional connections that we have with one another. So just kind of looking at where you're naturally drawn when you're reading these different types of resources and kind of going from there.
Another good place is to not so much look at developing the psychic as much as the spiritual aspect to it. And spiritualist churches often have workshops and
Right.
classes in spiritual development. I know that when I started out a long time ago, I was in a spiritual development group and not working on being psychic, but working on being more spiritual in my everyday life. And I remember the minister who was conducting the class at one point said, you all have done so well, and part of the whole thing was sitting in darkness and giving messages to one another. That was part of the whole process, to learn to be sensitive to what came to you and not question it, and to give it out because it would have validation probably with the person you were giving it to. And I remember at one point he said, we're going to do an evening at church and all of you are going to be part of the service. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And he assigned different pieces of the service, and he didn't assign anything to me, and I figured I was the newest in class. I was getting a free ride here. And on my way out the door, he stopped me and he said, and you're going to do the mediumship. And I looked at him, and I said, you realize I'm bored, stiff, sitting in darkness, so I've been making stuff up. I'm faking it. He said, no, you're not. I said, no, I guarantee you I am faking. I am just giving people whatever, and there's no spirit whispering in my ear. I'm faking. I'm a fake. And he said, no, you're not. You'll do fine. And I said, no, I won't, because I don't get messages. And he said, you will. And he said, look, you got lots of friends. I said, yeah, but this is a couple hundred people that aren't my friends. And he said, well, have your friends sit in the congregation, and if you feel that insecure, give your friends messages. And so I picked 5 friends, gave them all $20, said, please come. We'll go out and have wine afterwards. And I thought, okay, I've got it made. I sat there so confident, waiting for the service to come through, and and finally it was my turn to go up there, and I stood next to the minister, and I looked out, and not one of those blessed people were there. Not one of them not one had shown up, and so it was like, I looked at the minister, and he just winked at me, and I looked back at him and said, I have made myself a fool in front of larger audiences than this. I got no problem with this. So I gave 10 or 15 messages and sat down, and he looked at me and he said, this is very good. And I said, great creative mind here. And afterwards, everybody asked for readings because they were all accurate.
Wow.
They were all dead on. And
that's amazing.
It took him 7 years to convince me that what came naturally to me was a gift. And
right.
it took him 7 years to convince me I wasn't faking. But it's something that will come naturally to anyone if they open the door to it.
Right.
And the element of being creative, to my mind, helps people who are looking to develop this gift, because creativity is one of those things that fuels the spirit within.
Definitely.
So if people are looking for a program or some way to get involved with this, I mean, I would bet money that while you were doing all of your reading, you were also being creative on some level within your life, whether it was knitting or crocheting or drawing or painting or singing or whatever, but there was also that element of creativity that was going on in your life as well.
Yes, absolutely. And you're always in those types of engagement, you're moving energy, and I mean that's a lot of times why they say it's almost like the runner's high when you're in that creative flow and you lose sense of time. And for me, when I'm writing, for instance, I'm not trying to, but I can always sense when I'm connected with spirit and I'm channeling material to a certain degree, and it's just like I feel that in alignment and that energy moving and messages coming through, even though in my mind mentally it feels very much like I'm structuring things and these are my words and that type of thing. But once you start getting sensitive to your own abilities and your connection to this energy and something bigger, then you can start to recognize when you're tapped in to those types of things.
Well, I think also that's going with the flow for sure. And you did that in other parts of your life as well. I mean, you did go in some directions and then you stopped and realized that wasn't where your heart was, your spirit was, your bliss was, for want of a better word. And you changed professions in order to step into an arena that felt more comfortable to you.
Absolutely, yeah. And that can be really scary, but yeah, I did. I started I've done retail, I did factory work. I got into publishing as a graphic designer, and I knew that I wasn't quite where I needed to be, so I started studying massage and energy work, and that led me down another path, and eventually it all led me to where I'm at right now, which feels like where I'm supposed to be. So yeah, you get in that flow once you start paying attention mindfully to it.
And people who have, you're lucky, you're where you belong, and it feels really good. And I can say the same thing. But for people who are, because I taught school for 25 years, and while it was a good occupation, it wasn't teaching in the way I wanted to teach. But I didn't know that. And, how do people who feel stuck in their life, how do they start to get unstuck? How do they start to shift and move into a direction that will be more spiritually enhancing and refreshing to them?
I think part of it is asking the question in a way that allows you to connect with a higher wisdom. So having some kind of a meditation practice where you are allowing yourself to tune in and pause, where, you may have put out that request, but now it's time to be quiet, be still, and sink into any response that is coming to you. And outside of that type of meditation practice, then within your daily life, looking for those signs and symbols, those synchronicities, and just the opportunities that end up unfolding for you. Because when you're in the realm of manifesting, once you start looking for it, things are going to naturally unfold. This is something that I talk about actually in my other book, the Llewellyn's Little Book of Unicorns, because I get into a lot of how do we find our spark when we've kind of lost track of who we really are, who our authentic self is, and how do we get back on track with what we're really passionate about. So in that book, I actually delve into a lot of detail of how you can figure out the pieces of yourself that you might have lost along the way, and how you can remember those pieces of yourself and start to reconnect with that authentic core. And from there, it can be easier to figure out where you are really inspired and where your passion really lies and what direction you might be more effective and inspired in moving.
Yeah, and I think, you basically don't tell people to leave their job and follow a teacher or anything like that. I think one of the other parts that is you mentioned journals a lot.
Yeah.
And journals are a wonderful, wonderful tool. And if you are keeping track of the synchronicities, if you're keeping track of the weird things that happen, the phone ringing and you know who it is, or any of the little simple things, the more you keep track of them, the more you let the universe know that I'm paying attention. And so give me your signals, give me your symbols. And the other thing that I thought was such fun is the universe does address us often in symbols, and sometimes a symbol is just a symbol, and sometimes it means something else too. So, and often, even if it doesn't have a meaning, if you work with it long enough, you can find a meaning for it.
Mm-hmm. A part of that journal work too is helping you to understand what the messages are that might be coming through that you might not even initially be recognizing. Or if you know that there's a message trying to come through and you're like, okay, I'm getting the signs, I'm getting the, maybe you're getting a vision, or maybe you're just getting symbols in your environment, and you have this strong feeling that, okay, I know this is a message, but I don't get it. Sitting down and journaling, it can help you open up to connecting with spirit, connecting with that energy, and allowing more information to come through. And that's where I really think that journaling shines, is not only recording and being able to look back, but then also when you feel like there's more information that you need, you can start putting the pieces together even more and gathering more information that way. So I've had so many instances where I talk about one story in the book where it was like on the hour, every hour, all day, one day, I was getting some kind of symbol imagery or just shocking experience. And I didn't totally recognize that it was happening on the hour until I sat down and I started, okay, like something is here. I got to write this down. And I wrote it down and I was like, wow, okay, it was on the hour. this means that. Oh my gosh, this means that. Oh my gosh, this is all a message from my sister. And I wouldn't have gotten that without sitting down and writing it. It would have just been like, oh, this is weird. This day has been odd. But by sitting down and writing it all out, I could see the context, I could see the connections, and then I could feel actually my sister coming through with more information. So it can be a really powerful practice.
Oh, absolutely. And I think so often we dismiss those kind of symbols and those kind of experiences because we haven't taken the time to realize that we are, we're a spirit in the physical avatar, and spiritually speaking, we're getting pummeled constantly by information about our lives and about our direction and about choices or decisions or situations that are going on in our life, and if we're writing them down, if we're saying this is going to seem weird, but it eventually you weave it together. I know I talked to one lady, and be careful with interpretations. Sometimes the interpretations you intellectually put on a symbol don't really apply to what it actually means. I gave a woman once, I said, right. I keep seeing antique buttons for you all over the place. You might want to look at antique buttons or collections of antique buttons, or be aware of antique buttons in your life. There's something really. It was so strong. I gave it to her that way, and I tried to interpret it wrongly, and so 3 weeks later she called me and said, I've looked at antique buttons all over the place. They don't do a thing for me. I don't know what you were getting or why you were getting it, but that in no way, shape, or form does any of this correspond to what's going on in my life or what I was looking for, the answers that I needed. And I said, well, okay, antique buttons. Is there an older person that is pushing your buttons? And she said, oh my God, yes. So
yeah.
When you get a symbol, sit with it a while,
right,
before you go down a rabbit hole that isn't there. But it's something that we learn over time that there are symbols all over the place, and sometimes even our bodies and our emotions are telling us something. If, for instance, we're going through a situation that normally would be very upsetting, and yet we're as calm as we could possibly be, there's a reason. It could be past life. It could be a lesson that somebody else is learning, and you're just a part of it, and you're a trigger. It can be lots and lots of things. But the more things that you write down in a journal, the more attentive you are to your own physicality and emotionality and your spiritual sense of well-being, the more you get to know yourself. And once you know yourself to a degree where you trust yourself to be able to share your thoughts with other people, and that's another step here with your secret psychic stuff. When do you know it's appropriate to share information you're getting? And even before the appropriate, how do you share unless you're asked, or do you have to be asked?
I would say, so if you're receiving psychic information and you're wondering, should I share this? If you feel like it's a reading type of information that you're wondering, like, do I give this information to the other person? I always say don't do that unless you've been asked for a reading or for some kind of intuitive insight, because it can be really jarring for people, and it's kind of a no on the ethical scale to walk up to someone and be like, hey, I just got this psychic information and this is what it is. And it can be so jarring for people and an unwelcome thing. Like you don't know what people's background and beliefs and all of that is. So hold off on sharing that type of thing unless you're invited for it. But in terms of, like, I have this side of myself, this intuitive spiritual interest, and I really want to share this part of myself with other people and share these interests with other people, that type of discussion, I would say don't feel forced to share with other people. Like, if it's totally fine for this side of yourself to remain secret until you feel that point of like, you know what, I really want to connect with people and maybe like practice with other people or take classes or just have interesting discussions. Until you feel that point where it feels comfortable, it's totally fine to keep this side of yourself secret. So it's always kind of looking at yourself and feeling that intensity, whether or not it's like, yes, this is something I really want to do, or, you know, I don't feel quite comfortable. I'm going to keep this under the radar. Either way is fair.
Sometimes, you know, I've met people who have said, you know, I'm studying and I'm going to become a psychic and I'm going to do psychic readings. And, you know, sometimes that's not exactly what your spirit really wants.
Right.
Sometimes it's not, you know, sometimes it's not what your spirit wants to experience this lifetime. And in those cases, you know, I've met people who have said, you know, I've taken every workshop that's out there. I have a binder full of certificates, and I can't do a thing. And it's sort of like, well, maybe your spirit meant you to go in a different direction, and it's taking a nap until you wake up.
Right. Yeah, and like for me, I started taking classes really with the interest of, I was very interested in energy work, and so that was really where my primary interest lay. And the intuitive psychic side of it, I mean, they so interweave with one another, so that was really how both aspects started to develop together. And when I would be doing energy work and eventually massage, I would also get intuitive psychic information at the same time that I would be doing this energy and body work, which really helped me in the healing work that I was doing. And so I wasn't actively like, okay, I'm sitting down with a client and I'm going to give them a reading, which is based on information. It was more, okay, I'm working with a client and I'm reading their energy and I'm doing body work manipulation where we're working towards the goal of healing and well-being. So for me, it wasn't about the mediumship readings, the psychic readings. It was about this healing aspect. And I don't know if maybe someday in the future that might change, like maybe I will do readings, but so far in my journey, every time I've been drawn and had interest in that mediumship side, which I have a very strong interest in mediumship and reading and connecting with spirit, but I've always felt this wall where it's like, you know what, no, like at least not yet. And I don't know if maybe that means not yet in this lifetime. Maybe it'll come later, or maybe it's in the future life. I don't really know. So I've just followed the journey to where it is so far. I help other authors write their books and present their information on these topics, so I understand it really clearly and I can help them effectively in communicating their messages. And I know that those people go on to give readings and things. So I kind of utilize this insight and this maneuver through this world in a different way.
Well, I think when someone says psychic, you know, everybody thinks about a psychic fair and psychic readings. And, you know, there's so much more to psychic than just that one aspect. So that it's
right.
You know, being psychic is being sensitive. And that sensitivity can take you in, it's supposed to take you in other directions. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people that are very happy with being psychic, period, and that's as far as they want to go, and that's appropriate for them. And then there are other people that use psychic as a stepping stone to a greater sense of spiritual awareness and mediumship and whatever goes beyond that, and beyond that. So when people are looking to first and being psychic and understanding things and emotionally being able to see purpose and reason in situations that have happened to you is a very, I mean, it's very important, and it helps people to understand their lives to a greater degree, and possibly even the lessons that they, can see. I mean, oftentimes you'll see lessons being repeated in one form or another over and over and over in your life, and being able to psychically tune into what that lesson is can make it easier for you to accept the wisdom that is there and apply it to your life and then change the damn lesson.
Absolutely.
Sometimes there will be instances in my life when it's like, holy mackerel, I thought I dealt with that years ago, and here it is again. What did I miss?
Mm-hmm.
Where do I take this next? Because I don't want to do this again. So having light and laughter in your life as well as everything else is very important, because once you have that quality, the psychic, the spiritual, it does enhance it, and it expands it, and it makes it a lot easier for you to utilize these talents and these skills that we all carry. I know there was a lady that came to me once, and she was trying to connect to spirit, and she said, I've tried everything and I can't do it, and I don't understand it, and I've done everything I'm supposed to do. And I said, well, what are you doing? And she said, well, I start with prayer, and then candles, and then incense, and then music, and then chanting, and then more prayer, and then I'm open for communication. And I said, I think if there were spirits there to begin with, you bored the hell out of them. They probably went for a drink waiting for you to get ready. So that understanding that the spirit realm is there and is open to us, and there is really no ritual that makes it good or bad. It's being
right.
open and understanding yourself. And I think being a secret psychic, it's such a wonderful term. Developing that aspect within you so that you can enhance your reality, and maybe give readings, maybe not, but
mm-hmm.
make it easier for you to grasp why your spirit is here in the first place.
Right.
And we
right.
We never know fully what the purpose is, but we get direction
mm-hmm.
as you did. And what the coolest thing, I think, is that every now and then when we begin to doubt, when we begin to think, maybe I can do this professionally, or maybe, something happens that, when just as we're about to quit, something happens that gives us encouragement. And here's where your Velveteen Rabbit story comes in.
Right. Yeah, so this was the moment when it was the first time that I actually shared this side of myself openly with other people, and it's actually the first point that forced me to share this side of myself with my husband, which I didn't really know much about this side of myself even at that point. But I had been taking classes, and I was just meeting with a family member and some of her friends, and it just came up that, oh, you're taking these classes, would you give me a reading? And I was just like, okay, just so you know, like, I'm totally a beginner, I might not get anything, like, this might not be accurate, but sure, I'll give it a go. And they were all just totally fair game for it. They were like, fine. They didn't have high expectations. It was all good. And so I started tuning in, and I ended up tapping into one of the sitters, her brother. And that was the person that she really wanted to connect to. And I was trying to get information, and it was kind of like, well, that's kind of right. I guess that's close enough. And, different things that were like, that's kind of a hit. But then she asked, can you tell me what his nickname was? And so I tuned in, and I asked him, like, what was your nickname? And I started seeing images of like a stuffed animal. I was like, oh, this is super weird, but I didn't feel like this was right, but I was like, okay, I'm going to give what I get because that's what I was always taught. Was he called Fuzzy Bunny? And I mean, immediately I could see from the expression on her face, like, no, that's not what he was called. And I was like, okay, just a second, let me tune in again. And so I tuned in again, and I started seeing these inky lines, watercolor drawing, and I'm just like, gosh, what am I seeing right now? This seems so familiar. And it was like on the tip of my tongue, I was thinking of this story, a children's story with a bunny. Just like, gosh, I know this story. What is this that I'm seeing? And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, does Velveteen Rabbit mean anything to you? And she just froze. And she was like, yeah, he always said that he wanted to be real. And that's a line that is from the book, that it's all about this stuffed animal becoming real, and in the end he actually becomes a real rabbit in the end of the story. And the message of the story is that it's only when you are loved so much that you end up becoming real. And this part of that story was actually read at his funeral. And so it was just this hugely meaningful thing for her in connection with her brother. And it really shocked all of us. It really blew me away. I was just like, I can't believe that this just happened, even though I've been studying this and I believe it's real. I just kind of can't believe that this happened. And I still feel that way when I get signs and synchronicities, or when I get visions and I get these messages, and if I have those connections where it's like, oh my gosh, that's what it means, and I'm just blown away every single time. Because even though I really believe it, and I have this experiential experience with this spiritual side and this psychic connection, it's just so amazing every time that it shows itself in that way.
Absolutely. And, it's I think all of us need to have validation. And sometimes the validation comes like that, and sometimes it comes to saying something that you just think is so weird you can't believe it, and yet given time it comes true. And it's sort of like, okay, so at that moment you were connected at a very special level and place. And most of us, I will exclude you because you have written a book, so you probably know more than I, but I have found that when those magical things happen, sometimes you don't even realize that something magical is happening. I remember going for lunch with a friend of mine to a restaurant, and we were sitting down to eat, and all of a sudden the table started. Now, we were both into this spiritual development group. We were both into spiritual energy. We were both into, heavy duty into all of this. So we're sitting there at the table, and the table is rocking. And I said to him, stop it. And he said, I'm not doing anything. And so I put my feet on his feet, and the table kept rocking. And we started to giggle. And the waiter came up and said, is anything wrong? And I said, the table seems to have a life of its own. And he said, oh, that's weird. And he looked, and he saw neither of us were moving it, and it was moving. And so we had lunch with the table, making all sorts of gyrations. And afterwards we got in the car, and I looked at my friend, and I said, well, how stupid are we? Rock right for yes and left for no. Rock, we sat there for like 45 minutes. This table was rocking like crazy. Trains were going by or anything. And it never occurred to us to communicate.
Right.
And that's one of those moments when I think, how stupid are you? I mean, here was a physical manifestation, and you never said, rock rapidly for a yes, or, you give us some indication of who you are, where did you come from, what do you want to say? Nothing. And
right.
those moments do happen.
Right.
But
or they just shock you, like there was one time when I was with my husband, and we were putting in an offer on a house, and we were so nervous because we really wanted this house and we knew that other people were also putting in an offer. And we were crossing state lines, so it was a little bit complicated. And so we were meeting with a realtor who we had never met before because they had the proper licensing for that state. And so we were sitting there and we're signing, you do this huge pile of paperwork that you sign, page and page and page and page. And the realtor, she would pass it to my husband first and say, Lucas, sign here, and then she would pass it to me and say, Angela, sign here, and just monotonous over and over. Lucas, sign here, Angela, sign here. And then randomly, in between all that, she said, Lucas, sign here, Amanda, sign here, and that's my sister's name, who is on the other side. And then she immediately, she didn't notice it, and she immediately switched back, Lucas, sign here, Angela, sign here. Like, she didn't notice it at all, but me and my husband looked at each other and our jaws were just dropped, and we were just like, it was that moment of like, did that just happen? But we both noticed it, but she just kept going, so we had to keep signing. But then we left the office, and we were just like, oh my gosh, did you notice that? You heard it? Like, I can't believe that just happened. So we just had this sense of relief of like, okay, Amanda's here. And when I tuned in, it was kind of like I could feel my sister and just being like, calm down, you've got this, it's going to be okay. And we did end up getting that house. But it was just such an amazing moment that just, kind of slapped us across the face. So sometimes it can be pretty blatant when you're paying attention and looking for those moments and ready to acknowledge them when they happen instead of just dismissing them as like, oh, Angela's kind of similar to Amanda. I guess she just made a mistake. It was like, no, she just had my sister's name, and then I tuned in, and I could feel my sister there with me, and I could hear the message that she was giving. So it's taking those opportunities when they happen.
Well, with people who are starting out being there are I lost my track of thought. There are times in which we want something to happen so badly that
right.
It just keeps going. We keep trying to push it to go, and then there are
right.
times when it just flows. And
mm-hmm.
In my case especially, when you're in the flow, and it's really spectacular. And then there are moments when you're just not in the right place to do it. And I think it's important for people to be able to recognize when that energy is flowing and when it's not. I mean, it has nothing to do with what you've eaten, how much sleep you've had, or
yeah.
even, It's just, I don't know, there may be a cosmic special frequency that has to be tuned to or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. There's something that I talk about early in my book, in The Secret Psychic. I give notes of caution, and one of those notes of caution is about not becoming obsessive in your spiritual pursuits, in your practice of intuitive and psychic development. So it's like we want to remember we're physical right now. We're spiritual beings living in a physical body, and we don't want to become obsessive about that spiritual side. So we need to live in balance and not over-focus on the psychic side, the energetic side. So it's finding that balance, and that can be really challenging where how much do you believe? How critical are you of the information that you're getting? So it can be a balancing act as you're really learning things. In approaching it where you're open-minded, but so kind of mindfully assessing the information that you're getting too.
Yeah, and I think understanding that it's another muscle actually, but it's
right.
one that requires another level of spiritual insight, and everybody noticed I didn't say religious, I said spiritual.
Right.
you don't have to be a member of a church in order to do this work. You don't have to be a member of any organized religion or unorganized religion.
Right.
It's a
And if you
spiritual,
are, it's okay too. Where if you are a member of a religion or an organization, this merges. You know, it's not one or the other. Like, this can overlap and be a part of that as well.
Oh no, it's not. It's not instead of. It's alongside of.
Right. Exactly.
And it's but for people who are, I mean, these are times when people are looking for greater understanding of everything, including themselves. And so it's okay to ask for messages. It's okay to ask for signals. It's okay to ask for indications that you're getting through. But often those messages and insights can I caution people to ask for those, because sometimes they can smack you in the face. At one point, I painted a deck of mandalas that became an oracle deck, the cosmic deck of initiation. I was in the middle of painting them while I was single parent and school teacher, and often it took 12 hours at night painting, and then, of course, the work during the day, and then somewhere in there I got some sleep. But at one point I was walking the dog, and I was talking to the universe, and I was saying, you know, if this is my ego, I don't want to step in the wrong direction. And if what I am doing is an ego trip only just for me, I'm stopping it. It's just not worth it. It's stupid. And it was like 3:00 in the morning, and it was, I was saying, I need a sign. I need a sign that I'm doing the right thing. I need a sign that you're hearing me. I need a sign that this is something I should complete, that there's a reason for it, and whatever. And I said, a burning bush would be nice, but it's dry out, so we won't go there, and you've done it already anyhow. So, a booming voice from the other side, I could handle that. Just give me some sign that I'm on the right path here, and that I'm not just, an ego isn't, running wild here and having a lovely time. And this is like 3 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, quiet out, no cars, no trucks, no nothing. I could hear the rigging in the sailboats that were in a boatyard down the street. And it was like, I tell you what, I'm going to go on strike if I don't get a sign, because I don't want to do this if it's just for my ego. And a seagull flew over me and defecated on my head.
Oh my gosh.
And all I could think of was, next time I go on strike, do it inside. Because the birds don't fly at night. They just don't. And so it was definitely literally out of the blue. I finished the deck and got published. But it's okay to ask for a signal. It's okay to ask for a sign.
Right.
It's okay. Right. And the thing is, signs and symbols can be so many different things. So if you're going to ask for a sign or a symbol, I mean, what are some of the signs that people, when they ask for a sign, that they get? The one that I know of, that I have experienced, is when my late husband passed away. I've always believed, and it's always been something that I found, that I would find change in places where it shouldn't be. And after he passed away, I went to change the sheets on the bed, and once I got all the sheets off the bed, I looked, and here were pennies on the mattress.
My sister was all about pennies too, which she was in life, so it was very obvious after she passed that she was doing it also. It's just crazy.
Silver
But
dollars would
yeah,
have been
it
nice.
can. I agree. It can be a lot of things, like in terms of environment. Animals are very popular, and animals and insects like butterflies are commonly forms of signs and symbols. Looking to your environment, my dad got a very, very strong sign that I tell that I tell that story in the book, but it was of a license plate that he saw after he
Yeah.
had been praying and asking to know that my sister had just passed away, and we had the funeral, and he was asking for confirmation that she was okay. And in his prayer, he said he asked to know that she was happy. And then he was like, that didn't feel right. And to me, that was spirit calling back to him that, like, no, happy isn't the right word. And he decided he wanted to know that she was joyful. So that was the word that he got, was joyful. And then later that day, when he was leaving the house, his headlights shone on this license plate of a car that was right in front of his mailbox that had absolutely never been before. He'd never seen this car before. And the license plate said Amy Joy. And Amy was my sister's nickname, which is what the family members all called her Amy. And he just could not believe it. He called me and he's like, I was still at the house. He's like, can you go out and take some pictures? And it's just like, I can't believe that this just happened. And, it was that huge aha moment, and he just felt this sense of peace. And so it can come in so many different ways. And also my sister, she was all about personalized license plates. She had one herself. So yeah, from spirit, they can do a lot. It might be a billboard. It could be, an animal outside your window. It could be something that someone else around you says to them, because spirit can work in that way too, where they communicate through other people, even when they don't know, like the realtor who spoke my sister's name because she was trying to get a message through to me. There's so many things that you can be looking out for, and usually once you start tapping in, like if you're starting to journal especially, your radar is going to be on, and you're going to be more easily starting to pick up those cues when they do happen.
Oh, yeah. And music on the radio as well.
Yeah, definitely.
My late husband's a piece of music that for him was very important was Hotel California. And there are times when suddenly it is played on the radio so often that I just, I wonder, how the heck did that's an old song. And, it would, it just, and once you start noticing these synchronicities, these symbols from spirit, these kind of messages that let you know they're there, and, they aren't going to take up space at the dinner table exactly, but they're around. And to me, that's a very warm, exciting feeling that we are not alone.
Right. Yep. It can definitely be reassuring. And in many instances for me, it's actually been humorous because like that realtor story, once I tuned into my sister, it was her message, she was such a sarcastic person. So her message was just like, chill out, like you've got this. And there was another time that I was just in the yard landscaping, and a grandparent had passed away earlier that week. And so I was landscaping. I was totally tapped into the music that I was listening to, like pulling weeds. I was in that zone of being in the dirt. My mind wasn't wandering to like, oh, I should try to connect with spirit. But all of a sudden, I heard my sister, and I heard her saying like, oh, and see, sometimes she can hear me. And so she was referring to me, but she was talking to someone else. And so I tuned in, like, why am I hearing this? What's going on? And it was actually her with this grandparent. And it was almost like she was giving him a tour and showing him where she'd been and what she had been up to while he was still on Earth, now that he was with her. And it was, I burst out laughing because I was just like, okay, I guess I'm eavesdropping now.
Mhm.
but yeah, then I could tune in, and then I got from there it rolled into another message that I was supposed to be getting. But it can be really funny when you start just being curious and noticing the types of messages that are coming to you.
I think, though, something, at least from my standpoint, it's not something you can make happen. It's something you allow to happen.
Right.
So that trying to force something doesn't make it work. And when you stop forcing something, then you open yourself up to the potential of the universe, as opposed to scrunching your eyes and thinking hard about a person or a situation or whatever. It's sometimes we think we know what we're doing, and spiritually we don't know what we're really doing.
Right. Yeah, so the practice does really become learning how to allow and open yourself instead of like sucking so hard on the straw that you pinch it shut and you're not open to the energy that's coming to you.
Well, yeah, and so you have interviewed a lot of psychics and intuitives and mediums to pull material together for this book, and I think it was a fascinating approach to have their opinions in the book as well. Did you learn a lot from all of that?
I did. I think the most surprising thing that I learned, one, what I mentioned before, was just that surprise and that sense of validation that the beginnings of most of their journeys is really how I started too, and I would say how I would assume the majority of us as humans start, where we just have a curiosity and we have a yearning, we have an interest, and so we start setting on this path to learn more. And we might have this sense of, like, maybe you're feeling like you have the sensitivity or you get certain information, or it could just be that curiosity and that yearning to know more. So many of their starting points were just such a parallel, and that shocked me. And then another thing that I found so interesting, because I asked all of these individuals all the same questions, and then I laid out their responses back to back. So for one question, I would show each of their 12 responses so that you can see right on the page how each person compares in what their answer was. And for a lot of the questions, the answers were very much along the same line. So it's like, oh, okay, like there's pretty much a consensus of what the answer to this would be. And that was interesting. But then on the flip side, it was also really interesting to see those questions where their answers differed and how different people, different psychics, different mediums and intuitives have different ways that they might experience certain things.
Well, we're all in on a different level of ascension, transformation, whatever you want to call it, so that the perspective is absolutely 100% appropriate for the person experiencing it, and someone else, it will be totally different but totally appropriate. And I think that's really important for people to understand, that there is not a cut and dried appropriate way to do any of this. It's what's right for you.
Right. Yep. And it's learning that your personal individuality, and sometimes going from the starting point of where we have commonality can be a really good place to start. And then from there you learn what your own individual interest and skill, how that funnels.
Well, yeah, and again, allowing yourself to be guided to where you need to be, as opposed to thinking you know better than the universe does. I know when I first started out, like 50 years ago, Um, at one point, I thought the universe wanted me to travel the country with my deck of cards, and it basically, it was sort of like, okay, I got the message, universe. I'll take it from there. And I put together presentation books, and I contacted stores all across the United States, and each of these presentation books cost me like $100 to put together. And I called the stores and spoke with the owners, and yes, they were interested, and I sent my presentation books off, along with a return envelope, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And there were like 20 or 25 of them, and I never heard back from any of those stores.
Oh.
Not a one of them. However, the stores that I did work that approached me, that snowballed like crazy. And it was, as I sat back and looked at all of it, it was like, okay, so the message is, wait for the call, don't make it.
Mm-hmm.
At least for me.
Yeah.
And I have found that for me, that has worked beautifully. And when there aren't calls, then that means that I'm supposed to be doing something else, and I do something else. But
Mm-hmm.
from that experience, I learned that while it seemed logical to me, it obviously wasn't logical to the universe. And it was kind of like, okay, so this experience, I was placed where I was supposed to be placed, and it snowballed from there without me pushing it, but with me thinking, oh, I got this, I figured this out, and I'll just skip a couple of rungs on the ladder and send my stuff out to places that I'd like to go and be connected to. And from that lesson, I learned really fast. Apparently, if it costs me money, I learn it faster. But but it was like you wait for the call. You don't assume you're meant to be this or that or something else, or here or there or otherwhere. You wait for the call, and at least for me, the call has always come at the right moment, at the right time, and it's been perfect. This is 50 years later, I might add. There were a couple of places in there where I thought I really had it figured out when I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But happily, you can laugh at yourself. And if frequently it becomes a teaching tool for somebody else, that's even a better idea. So, but it's a special aspect of life, and anybody who is on this pathway, secret or otherwise, they have adventures ahead of them that are just so wonderful. They should be journeying them down, even if there's starts and stops and places where they've stepped off the path into deep mud pits. A groove can become a ditch real easy if you don't get out of it fast enough. So, there's the messages and the insights that you gain along this trail are just so fabulous. And, you've written a wonderful book, and if other people are journeying in the same manner as you have, or as I have, I mean, that material is a wonderful teaching tool and a wonderful source of information for other people out there.
Right, and that was what my goal was. Like on my own journey, I felt like I had these experiences, I had this interest, I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone about any of it, and so practicing in secret was challenging in a lot of different ways. Just one, for the fact that it was like, oh, this is so awesome that I want to talk to someone about it, but I didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to about it. And then on the flip side, it's like there's this side of you that feels so incredible and that you have to keep secret, and then you almost have this like public persona where it's like, okay, I can't talk to other people about this aspect, and so I'm going to pretend to be this normal human person in everyday life. And that was one of the things that I really wanted to give people, was learning how to bridge those two sides so that you don't feel like you're living two different lives. So you can learn how to integrate your spiritual experience into your everyday life. Even if it continues being the secret side of yourself, but also if it ends up being where you want to start sharing with other people, like how do you even go about doing that in a way that feels safe and empowering? So I have so many different tips and insights from my own experience, but then also from these 12 other people that I had interviewed. And one of my friends was an incredible confidant through this as well, because so much of what she was going through a couple of years leading up to my writing this book was such a parallel to my own secret psychic journey that had been like 20 years prior. And so many of the questions that she was asking and the interests that she had were the exact things that I had been asking and the resources that I'd been looking for too. So it was almost like I could rewatch myself unfolding through her eyes and be reminded of what are the most important questions that people are going to be asking. What is the most vital information that people need when they're going through this journey? And it really helped in writing the book to have that fresh right in front of me through that experience that my friend was going through too.
Absolutely. It's sometimes a lonely journey when you feel you're isolated. And the reality is just about everybody has these inclinations, these questions.
Right.
And so it's you can start a conversation with, what's the weirdest thing that ever happened to you? Let me tell you mine. And, open it up that way. I the phone rang and I picked it up and I knew who it was. Or, those kind of synchronicity. And you can start it with synchronicities. Have you ever had a synchronicity in your life? And, synchronicity isn't as scary as a psychic experience or a spiritual whatever. So that on many levels there are people who intellectually will talk about synchronicities that are genuinely talking about spiritual occurrences, but they don't even realize it. So it's not, by the way, something that you can spring on your family at the Thanksgiving table.
Right.
Which I did one year. So it made for a very quiet Thanksgiving.
Speaking from experience.
Yeah, it's kind of like, don't go announcing it from the mountaintops because you're going to find it very lonely after a while.
Right.
But, I mean, my family at first, thought I was crazy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
After 50 years, those who are still around realize that I'm not. But there are moments that you just. I think the ones that if I had to caution anybody, it would be, don't take challenges because they never come out well.
Right.
Spirit doesn't like to be challenged. And you can almost guarantee that if you take a challenge because your ego is just dying to take it, you're going to screw up.
Right.
So, testing spiritual psychic energy is, there are those people that take the test and do it well. I'm not a good test taker. But
I'm not either.
but
wasn't in college.
If depending on how old you are, you can play with this. And if you have friends, if you're in school or in, or quite young, it's a lot of fun. The older you get, the more serious you begin to take all of it, and then it becomes important that you understand it and the people who you're talking to understand it and appreciate it. I can speak from experience. There are friends that are no longer friends, and then there are friends that are friends for life. And
Mhm.
sometimes getting involved in the actual physicality of readings and being psychic and things like that, it does separate the men from the boys, so to speak. But
Mhm.
with massage therapy, with Reiki energy, I mean, that's wonderful material to work with, and in many ways, it's not threatening to people.
Right. And that was also one of the goals that I had with this book, was to really ground it, so that because to me that's what these abilities are. Like, they're a part of everyone. And whether or not you recognize it, we're all using these abilities to some degree. And so I wanted people to see what that looks like day to day in your daily life. And one of the ways that it often reveals itself more dramatically for people is when they lose someone. So when someone crosses over and they may be in grief, but they might start experiencing the common types of things that happen when we have continued bonds with the people that we've loved and lost. And these types of things a lot of time end up being things that people feel like they can't talk about with other people because, one, they might be worried or that they're just making things up, or they might be concerned that other people might just dismiss it, when to them it is just this really significant and meaningful experience, and so they kind of want to hold it safe to themselves so that they can honor that connection. So a part of writing The Secret Psychic was to help people recognize that this is very grounded, this is very real, we're all using these abilities, and we can start when we feel like we want to, we can start to broach these topics with other people. Like, I want people, when they're living in that grief state, to be able to feel like they can share those really meaningful experiences that they might be having in regard to, like, continued bonds, because that can be so healing in that grieving process, to be able to share those types of things.
Absolutely. And, one of the non-threatening ways to help people get into this energetic field is with Reiki, because that's working with energy, and you're flowing your energy with another person's energy, so you're feeling that power. And then it's a perfect place, if appropriate, to share what you're getting for the other person.
Yeah.
So
that's very true. That's what my experience was very much when I was doing energy work for people. I would sometimes say ahead of the session, I would let them know sometimes during a session I might get intuitive information. Is if I get something during the session, is this something that you would want me to share with you? So I would lay that out ahead of the session so that I didn't surprise them, and it gave them the decision of whether or not they would receive that information.
Well, I think one of the important things, a lot of people who in their later years get involved with this field is because of mediumship, because of a desire to touch in with somebody who has passed over. In that instance, to me, it's their wanting and needing to have some sort of validation is, in some ways, gets in the way of the actual reality of what happens when you are opening yourself up to that kind of communication. Sometimes you get spirits that aren't the people you're looking for, but are spirits that have a message or whatever. So it's not something I would suggest as your very first opening gambit into this field, because mediumship does require some sort of balance psychically in order to be able to open to that kind of energy, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that you can understand who you're connecting with, that can be definitely really important.
But on the other side, when people cross over, lots of times they really do try to communicate with people they loved and they've been close to. And so what are some of the ways that spirit can make itself known to relatives and friends without requiring them to be a full-blown medium? Pennies being one of them.
Yes, that one is definitely a common one that a lot of people are aware of, I think because of the movie Ghost, because the pennies were a part of that movie. Visions, you might have, and this isn't something for a lot of people that is like a really dramatic vision, big thing playing out for you. It might just be like a quick flash, almost like someone is flashing pictures in front of your vision or like in your memory. So visions, when I speak of them, it's like I would say, for example, picture your bedroom right now, and then picture your bedspread, and what color is that, and what is the pattern that is on your bedspread. So the way that you're seeing that right now is the same way that for most people you would experience a vision, where you're seeing it within your mind. And so when spirit is bringing you a vision, for a lot of people it ends up feeling like just photos flashing in your mind, and it might just be one quick flash or maybe a couple. And then if you decide to tune in and feel out like, okay, was that just a message? That was really weird. You can tune in and then see if more information comes to you. And I have practices in my book that help you delve deeper into that type of things unfold even more. You might hear sounds or words, like you had mentioned, hearing your name called. And sometimes this can be the same way that you hear with your physical ears. So if you hear like your name being called or some kind of other noise, but it could also play out in the same way that we hear our thoughts in our mind, where it can sound exactly like your own thoughts, which makes it really challenging sometimes to understand if this is your own thought or if it's a message that's coming to you. But as we start tuning in even more, there's almost a different quality to the thought when it's coming from spirit or from someone else. So once you start practicing and developing your abilities, that becomes easier to recognize as well. You could also just get a feeling or impression. I know at my sister's funeral, a handful of people said there was a moment where they felt like my sister was hugging them. So that's a really strong feeling. So it was like a warmth around their hearts, and they felt this sensation of being hugged, and they felt like it was her imparting that to them. So it can be a feeling, or you might just all of a sudden have this sensation that a loved one or someone is near you. And in that moment, in the form of our continued bonds, that might be when you start talking to them and having this kind of communication of like just having a conversation in your mind with them, and you can kind of feel like they're there with you. You could also have disturbances in your environment, so where a lot of times people will talk about electronics going off. I had a friend who, after her dog died, they had disturbances with their TV to the point where my friend was totally convinced that this was her dog, but her husband was not convinced, and he ended up throwing out the TV and getting another one, only for it to have the exact same things happen. And then finally, when he was like, okay, fine, it's the dog, it stopped, and everything was so... when it comes to those types of disturbances, you always want to be aware of like, okay, my lamp is flashing, but maybe the light bulb is just bad. So that's when you really need to have discernment of like, okay, is this actually a message, or is it just an electronic going wrong, that kind of thing. So you could also have physical objects being moved. So the pennies, that's one example of that. or you could have visitations in a dream. That one is really common, and I had that happen a lot after my sister passed away. And I talk about, in my book, I give a practice in how to discern if it's truly a visitation dream from someone versus if it's just your mind trying to process your own grief and the experience of loss. So there's some discernment there, too. So there's a lot of different ways that they can be coming through to us, and there's all these different avenues, and they can interweave with one another. And when we start paying attention, like, you don't have to be a professional psychic or have a ton of skill or be practicing for a long time. Just once you start paying attention to these different avenues, it can be really amazing that how many things you start noticing.
Oh, and again, journals, definitely journaling it, but you missed two, and one is smelling. Often there's
right.
the fragrance of somebody. There are times when I smell someone that was close to me, and there's no one around who's wafting anything at me,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that it's the Old Spice, and it's my father used Old Spice. And
Yeah.
there have been times when I've just been out walking and Old Spice surrounds me, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that's so cool. And
Yeah.
and the other is the other is taste.
Yeah.
There used to be another psychic that worked with me on the radio show many years ago, and she actually taste is what got to her. She hated peanut butter. She just hated it. And without fail, I would, not every time, but every now and then, I would just to test her, I would eat peanut butter before the show, and the first thing she would say to me was, "Barbara, you had peanut butter." And it was weird because she was always right, but there are those that that is their sensitivity, their taste buds, and
Yeah.
so we have many senses, and all of them can be approached by a spirit and utilized to get our attention. So
Right.
journaling, I stress journaling to everybody because and sooner or later you get used to the fact that you recognize most of these things and you don't bother journaling them down. But in the beginning, journaling is so important because, even if we don't think it's meant to be something, if you write it down in a couple of days, you can go back to it and see how it weaves into something else that happened in your life, and therefore it was a message. There was a reason for something that some synchronicity that happened. So it's really important to put them down, and if you've got good recipes, put the recipes down in your journal too. But don't make it just specifically for a specific thing. Let it be a journal that is a reminder of things that have happened to you in your life, in your daily life, while developing these skills that we have that are part of our makeup. They're not, when you buy a car, there are always extras you can throw in. These are not extras that have been thrown in. We came with all the bells and whistles. We just haven't learned to use them all yet.
Right.
And journaling, helps to awaken, those aspects. I was kind of wondering, with all of the people that you talk to in order to get this book published, the different experts in the different fields, how did you choose them? How did you find them? Were there different categories you wanted to fill, or was it just trusting what you found would be appropriate for the book? How did you choose the people that you used as experts?
Well, I wanted to know personally that the individuals were credible. So all of them I have either worked with, so many of them are authors that I have acquired their books and I've I've worked on their books with them, so I've worked with them very closely for many years. Or, for example, in the instance of John Holland, I've met him at different events, and so I have spoken with him directly, and I've seen him do his work live, where he's done gallery readings. So I've witnessed his credibility in person. So that was actually how I ended up choosing them. I wanted men and women. I wanted people of different backgrounds, different. So some of them are really focused in giving readings, and some of them are really focused in energetics and healing work. Some of them are very focused in either psychic readings versus mediumship readings. So I was looking for variation in who I was speaking with.
Okay, it's just, it's an eclectic group for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what because the reader or the readers that are coming to this book are a range of different people. And so I wanted people to be able to potentially see themselves in some aspect of the people that I was interviewing. So I wanted definitely to have a range of different types of people.
Well, I think you did a great job.
Well,
I was
you.
I was very impressed with all of them. I thought that they all had great validity, and this field is noted for having some very unique characters in it, and it seems to me that you really selected a great many that all of them, as a matter of fact, none of them are what I would call on the edge or the fringe of being strange or unusual, and it's a lovely group of people, and I think they took the interview that you did with them very, 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 very seriously.
Yeah, they did.
They were all being very, very serious about their replies. You can tell that they were thoughtful. They'd been thought over. They'd been worked on, and that they were going for as deep a meaning as they could possibly, give you at that particular point in time.
Mm-hmm.
With people who read your book, one of the questions that is going to be on most people's minds is, okay, so when do I tell people I'm psychic? And do I have to prove it? And when do I come out of the closet as someone who has psychic ability? And it's a good question. I mean, just because you are psychic doesn't mean you're going to be practicing as a psychic. So, how do you weave that into your everyday life?
I think that is a really personal question for each individual to answer for themselves, because I think every person's experience is going to be a little bit different and specific to whatever their own life situation is. So I don't have a blanket answer for that, but I definitely have steps that you can take and that you can kind of assess, like, am I ready? Okay, maybe not quite. And then I have exercises that you can do for figuring out, for example, one good way to start stepping out is to look for instruction and start connecting with people who off the bat have a like-minded perspective or interest, so that you aren't, when you start sharing who you are and these interests that you have, you aren't hitting your head against a wall with people that just aren't going to be receptive to what you're saying. So that's a safe way to start approaching things, is connecting with people who you absolutely know off the bat are going to be like-minded. So how do you go about finding instruction that makes sense for you? That's a really good question to start asking. And I have a lot of different resources in the book for different organizations that you might look at, different online resources, different types of programs that you can be looking for, or like in a local internet search, different key phrases that you can type in with your city name or your location, and then see what comes up for that type of a thing in your local area. And then from there, you can start looking at in your own personal practice, like look at long-held beliefs that you have versus what you see your new spiritual experience being, and start kind of sorting out where you've been versus where you want to be heading. This can be a really good area to start kind of starting to see what area the like-minded people are that you're looking for. So like what types of classes, what types of instruction are you interested in looking for? Like for me, it was very much around energy work, and that was how I found my community and people that I could talk to about this side of myself. So asking yourself, what is my interest, and what do I want to be sharing about with other people and learning about? And then from there, you can, once you start kind of assessing your interests and reaching out to find the resources, you can start looking for opportunities to connect with a confidant, or maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend that you already have, where you can start to ask safe questions, hypothetical questions, which you had mentioned before of maybe you are having a conversation with someone and you're talking about a show and there's a psychic on the show, and you start talking about that character's experience and just being like, hey, have you ever had, or like, do you believe in this kind of thing? You know, there's different safe ways that you can start to kind of approach those topics with people that you know. So yeah, I give a ton of different exercises and resources in the book to start opening that door for yourself.
Absolutely, and you know, I think it's interesting once you start on this pathway. It's very exciting, and the more you are open to experiencing psychic phenomena, the more frequently it does happen. And I have known people that were on that pathway and that they just absolutely couldn't handle what they were experiencing, and so they shut it down. And I think it's important for people to understand that you are in charge of how much or how little or how much of this energy you want to flow in your life. It's not getting on a slippery slope and suddenly deciding, ooh, this isn't for me, but I'm committed, so I have to go all the way to the bottom.
Right.
That's not the whole. You know, you can put a hold on it if it's a little bit too much for you. You can adjust how you're utilizing this energy. You can utilize meditation to pave a way for you to deal with it in a better, more healthy way. I mean, you have total control over this is what I'm trying to say.
Right. That was my experience early on too, was, you know, I started opening myself up when I was like 12, and by the time I was 14, I was just like, this is too weird. Like, I started getting some not fun experiences that I just couldn't understand, and I was working on my own, so it was just too much. So I pretty much shut down for 4 or 5 years until, you know, I was more mature, I had more boundaries set for myself, and I felt safer in opening myself back up to the experience.
Yeah, so, I mean, no matter how old you are or young, it depends on your background and how you've been brought up and what you believe in. It's not, and again, it's not meant to replace anything. It's meant to be, alongside of instead of, not instead of, so that it's a wonderful asset to your tool belt. Whether you use it in just trying to figure out what people in your life, you know, what their agendas are and how deeply you want to become involved with them or not. It's a wonderful tool to use in any situation, if you just stop and quiet yourself and say to yourself, where are they coming from, and address them on that level. I think for me, especially with the work that I've done with the public, for me, using that aspect, that tool has helped me greatly in making great connections with people, in taking the time to step back and say, where are they coming from? What chakra is most active in their level of awareness? And that's the chakra I address myself to, whether it's on an intellectual level or a spiritual level or a communicative level or a survival level. You can utilize these tools that you gain through this awakening inside of yourself to be a better communicator in your everyday life, and never have to say the word psychic ever.
Right. Yeah.
And yet that's what you're doing.
Right. And that's something that's one of the first things that I talk about in the book is the language that you choose to use and what it actually means versus what it doesn't mean. I lay that out right away because I know the word psychic can be scary for a lot of people, but if you take that word off the table, just using intuition, like that is usually much more accepted in the mainstream, I would say. So you can totally defer to that language, and if that's more comfortable, then roll with it.
Well, yeah, and the reality is that we are electromagnetic beings, so that there's an energy field that is around us, and you can scientifically go into all of that and explain just about everything scientifically, and yet it has the spiritual realm that it is incorporated into all of it, so that, it doesn't matter what vocabulary you use so long as you are communicating. And I have found that lots of people, while they don't want to talk psychically, they will talk energetically, or they will talk spiritually. But it's not a religious slope you're on; it's a spiritual slope, which is so cool because and every major religion has spiritual philosophies. And if you stick with the philosophies, you can't go wrong. I mean, well, you can go wrong, probably. I mean, certainly if one can go wrong, I've probably done it at one point in time or another. But the reality here is that this is very special work. It's a very personal work, and utilizing those tools that you've got just makes your life so much richer. A favorite term of mine, and I don't think I invented it, but I don't know who did. It takes your life from a black and white reality to a technicolor one very fast.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good metaphor for it.
And the richness that is there, the laughter and the joy that is there is really quite spectacular. And again, the term psychic has always turned me off because it has such bad connotations to it. But I've used terms like empath, like I've looked for terms that explain what you're doing without being a psychic. And the easiest term you can throw out there is psychic, and then people know, oh yeah, okay, you're one of those.
Yep.
And it's a shame because I'd love to see a lot of this stuff taught in schools. I'd love to see energy work taught in schools. It to me,
Absolutely.
it makes perfect sense. I mean, Reiki and Tai Chi. I taught special education, and I found that I could teach the kids some basic Tai Chi, and we would do the Tai Chi first thing in the morning, and they were calmer for the whole day because of it.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, you
I could
can
have used
incorporate
that.
but it's and I don't know. We were talking about Egyptian stuff, and suddenly meditation came into the talk, and they said, "What is that?" And so we sat and we meditated.
Mhm.
The I mean, so many areas have touched onto this field, and today it's so much more easily accessed. The super learning they had with Vivaldi's Four Seasons. I found if I played that music subtly in the background, the classroom was quieter and they could pay attention more. So energetically, there are so many things out there that can be used as tools that enhance your physical reality that have nothing to do with quote-unquote psychic stuff.
Right. Yep. It's kind of funny too because the foreword for The Secret Psychic was written by Echo Bodine, who was actually my beginning instructor. She was the first instructor that I had in energy work and these spiritual teachings. And the first line that she has in the foreword is, "I wish a family member would read every child this very important book before they ever hit preschool." And when I read that the first time, it hit me because I could identify with that. Like, knowing this type of material would have really helped me when I was younger, because
Absolutely.
I've always been so sensitive and very tuned into energetics, very tuned into other people's emotions, and not understanding that soup that I was swimming in was very confusing and disorienting.
Well, it's even with psychic art, with scribbles, you can identify children that are outgoing and children that are going to be harder to get to. You can identify even autistic children from their scribbles. You hand them I had a friend who was a kindergarten teacher, and once a year she would bring me scribbles by the kids, and we would look at them, and we'd be able to see which child will go outside of the box, which is wonderful and creative, and then the kids that stayed inside the lines, and the kids that stayed, in one little corner were more into themselves and needed to, be helped to come outside of themselves. And I mean, there were so many things utilizing these skills, these sensitivities that we have at our fingertips, enhances what we can do for other people as well as ourselves.
Mhm.
So it's I think we all owe it to ourselves to take it as far as we can in whatever direction that opens to us. And sometimes the directions that open to us are not the ones we anticipated or thought about. So
Right.
I mean, no way in creation did I ever think that I would be doing psychic work or being on a radio show or interviewing people from all over the world. I mean, that just never crossed my mind.
Right.
When I was in my 20s, I was going to be married, have children, and a white picket fence, and that was it.
Mhm. Yep.
And it couldn't have been further from the truth. So, and I still don't know what I'm going to be if I grow up. So, it's it's an exciting adventure. And I think your book gives people a wonderful foundation and a wonderful way to step into the field and be open to what the field has to share with them.
And my goal in all of it was to really empower people, to be able to recognize and understand the different types of experiences that they might have if they're on the very sensitive side of things, to understand things that they might have not been understanding their entire lives and been confused about. And then on the other side of the spectrum, people who really don't notice things, but just have a curiosity, like how they can even begin to start to cultivate these abilities and notice when they're actually engaging with them. So it's really, really my hope that it will help empower people.
Well, I can't see how it could not. I mean, and you've done a beautiful job of getting opinions from lots of different people. And I really, as I said, I've recommended the book to a number of people already because it's a good, solid, foundational book, and it gives you everyday techniques, and it isn't trying to sway you one way or another. It's just giving you a way to fully understand yourself and your own energies. And that's a really important tool and gift to give to people. And I'm sure that there's probably another book in the making as we speak, so, or probably will be.
I hold out curiosity. I'm not sure what that would be, but I definitely am open to it.
Well, so long as you're open to strange and wonderful, I mean, that's a great place to be. So yep. we're getting here to the end of our time frame. Are there some workshops or whatever that you're giving that you want to put out there, or how do people contact you if they want to?
They can contact me through my website at www.angelaann.wix.com/arts. And if that is too confusing, because it kind of is, you can just Google my name, Angela A. Wix, and the book is The Secret Psychic. And if you Google that, my website will pop up. And you can also reach me through Instagram and Facebook at Angela A. Wix, and that's W-I-X. And then if you decide to purchase a copy of the book, I'm offering free signed book plates. So this is something that I would sign, and then I would mail it out to you for free, and you can stick it on the inside of the cover of your book so that you can essentially have the book signed by me. So if you want a free signed book plate, you can just go to my website, go to the About page, and there's a contact form that you can just say, signed book plate, and then provide me with your name and address, and then I'll mail that out to you right away.
Well, and it's a wonderful book. It should absolutely be in everybody's library. And, actually buy two because you're going to want to give one away anyhow. So might as well just get two to start out with. I want to thank you so very much. This has been a great show, and I so totally appreciate your being here and giving us, 2 hours worth of your wisdom and your knowledge and your experience.
Well, I'm very honored to have had you ask me to be on the show too, and that you thought so much of the book. That means a lot.
Well, I don't normally, review books that I don't like. No, it's a fabulous book. I really advise people to get a copy of it because it's well worth having, reading, and certainly after listening to this interview, I bet a whole bunch do. So I do thank you again for your time and your energy and your insight and your creativity and for all the work you put into this amazing book.
We are very, very welcome.
Okay, guys, it's that time. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow night because I've got James Tabor. So it's a double header this week, 8 o'clock tomorrow. And thank you, Angela, again, and thank you, everybody, for listening. Good night now.